How does a telecommunications company find the right data center customers, the right data center clients? How does a telecommunications related company find the right data center customers and clients? I think a lot of it comes down to what part of telecommunications your company is involved in. Or do you just resell telecommunications related services? Perhaps like you'd consider yourself a consultant or a broker or a channel partner type of rep. Are you a carrier? Do you provide niche products or services, testing, or some kind of monitoring or software for telecommunications that works with the data center industry? This will be very, very predictive of how you create the right kinds of marketing and sales motions, the right go-to-market strategy for finding the right customers. So as long as your company is already established, you likely already have a book of business. You likely already have a customer or client list. And from that, we're going to use that as the basis for prioritizing what to do first around our goals, our SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goals around new client acquisition, new client growth, and new revenue growth. This looks like it's focused primarily on net new customers, net new logos, as it's sometimes called, if you're going after enterprise clients as opposed to revenue growth. So once we know where your company has been most successful, then we'll document our ideal client profile so we know geographically where are these data centers going to be located. Can you sell globally? Or can you only sell within a certain continent or within certain countries or just a single country or just a region of a country? That's going to be incredibly important to finding the right data center customers, of course, is what your company's capabilities are and where you can actually install these circuits. Second is the company sizes, the size of the data centers where you tend to be most successful. Have you done well across the board, even with the smallest like single location, co-location operators with a handful of employees, all the way up to the biggest global data center operators, the NTTs, the Equinixes, the Digital Realties, and then of course all the ones in between. So is your company getting a lot of success, or your clients getting a lot of success regardless of their company size? Or is there a certain kind of too big and too small band range that we need to set up here for amount of megawatts, for amount of square footage, or for something as mundane as being able to look in LinkedIn Sales Navigator and say, okay, we want companies in digital infrastructure, in data centers that have between 50 and 5,000 employees or something like that, or between 50 and 1,000 employees. Only you can tell me what that right band is. A lot of it's going to depend on where your account managers, where your customer success managers have had the greatest results, where are your clients the happiest based on what you do with your telecommunications in and around the data center industry, your interconnects, your peering arrangements, whatever you're doing in the data center space. So there's a geographic component, there's a company size component, and then there's likely also a business model or an industry component, depending on the nature of the data center operator. Like, what do they specialize in? And do you have the capabilities to be able to support them at the intersection of their geographic region and their vertical industry focus? Because, of course, there's certain regions of the world where there's regulatory issues across the board, but then there's also certain regions of the world where there's regulatory issues that are specific to both the location of the data center as well as the kinds of clients, the kinds of industries that are located within that facility. So that will help you sharpen your ideal client profile. From there, you should be able to build out a target account list of a few dozen or a few hundred, maybe even a few thousand potential data center operators that you want to do business with. And then within those companies, we need to know who we need to be educating and building trust with. Those are going to be the individual kinds of buyer personas, which is a semi-fictional representation of an ideal kind of stakeholder based on actual research and some select educated speculation. Most people tend to, as a starting point, think of buyer personas as job titles, but they're much more than that. A buyer persona is a representation of a group of kinds of people within across the board at your client base. And what they have in common is their shared goals and their shared struggles, their shared challenges. And the way you figure these out is by talking to your buyer personas or surveying them or see how they describe themselves, what they put on their LinkedIn profile, what kinds of content they share, what kind of groups they belong to, what events they go to. When you find these commonalities in their own words, and that's the key thing here, is we need their own words, not what you think their words are, but what their words actually are. You arrive at a consensus for what should go on that buyer persona document, which generally, if you're looking to do this pretty intensively, should be a lot more than would fit on the back of an envelope. Is probably a couple pages of detail on their goals and challenges. And from there, you can build an educational content calendar, an events calendar for your events that educate and build trust. It could be a lot of webinars and live streams like this. It could also be some offline versions of that, like symposiums that you hold, that you sponsor, conferences that you hold, that you run yourself, where you can dramatically influence the editorial content, or just simple basic things like simple basic events like breakfast seminars, lunch and learns. The key thing is it's heavily focused on attracting the right people and educating and building trust with those people, so you are able to intercept them as early as possible in their buyer's journey. We now live in a world where most of your data center customers that are looking for telecommunications services don't want to talk with your sales team anymore. And if they do want to talk with them at all, it's going to be at the extreme end of their buyer's journey. Like 10 years ago, people in this industry would talk to sales teams when they were like halfway through the buyer's journey. At the time, CEB, the corporate executive board, did research with Salesforce and SiriusDecisions, and they found about 56% of a typical journey was over before vendor contact, before sales contact. CEB is now part of Gartner, and Gartner more recently updated that data and found that about 83% of a typical buyer's journey, researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing, now happens before sales contact. So 83% of their research and decision-making process is over before they're willing to meet someone from your sales team. So it's incredibly important that we figure out a way to use educational content, educational events to get in early, so that they no longer, you no longer want your sales team to be perceived as traditional transaction-focused sales professionals. They need to show up as teachers, consultants, trusted advisors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders. And when you do this well, you will spend a significant amount of the typical 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision with your ideal clients. When you completely drop the ball on this, if you're lucky, maybe you're in on 1 or 2 or 3 of those touch points of the 28 between complete stranger and purchase decision. A lot of companies in this space invest really aggressively in sponsoring other people's events and field marketing, but you don't get extra credit because the cabana party was epic or the golf tournament was amazing. Those still each only counts as 1 touch point. So we need a way to make sure that we're spending a lot of time with our ideal clients, showing them valuable insights on how other companies, other stakeholders in these companies have navigated through similar kind of research and decision-making processes. They no longer need your sales team to show up and read the website to them. They need your sales team to show up and look a lot more like Big 4 consultants, as if they work for like EY, KPMG, PwC, Deloitte, something like that. Because we need to make it so, we need to establish conditions so that your prospects and clients want to spend time with members of your sales team, as opposed to your sales team having to beg, cajole, manipulate, and bribe those folks to show up. So at the end of the day, for a telecommunications company that wants to find the right data center customers, we need to become very self-aware of understanding that the entire way that your data center customers research and make purchase decisions around telecommunications has completely changed. It's very unlikely that we're going to go back to the days of dial-up modems or fax machines or printed phone books or printed trade publications being the dominant tools. We are where we are. We know people want a self-driven buyer's journey. Part of it is a changing of the guard as we've moved from decision-making being predominantly made by baby boomers to Gen X and millennials and Gen Z. We know that during the early 2020s, with people working from home, digital transformation accelerated even faster. And the question is, do you want to live in the current? Do you want to be responsive to the way that your buyers actually want to buy? Or are you going to be living in the past and selling to the 5 or 10% of the people that are digitally resistant? if you want to tap into the data center CTOs and telecommunications managers and operations managers and all those folks that are heavily involved in making decisions around telecommunications, I'd encourage you to make sure that you update your playbook to how your data center customers are researching and comparing their telecommunications options and ultimately making telecommunications purchase decisions in the modern buyer's journey.